Impressionism. 13 artists children should know. Bum 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 ba bum bum ba bum dun 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 dun. And we are done. Alright, firstly, a lot of these artists that you're just seeing here, all this art has actually been done during the Impressionism day, so 19th century is the best time to actually go ahead and depict them. Let's start off with this artist, this special artist here. His name is Edouard Manet. Edouard Manet. Speaking of which, this person himself is actually one of his greatest times too. During Manet's lifetime, his hometown of Paris has actually changed so many times. Been into old buildings, streets, turned into new modern buildings. And back then, also, a lot of people actually spent their free time in new cafes and bars, and he wanted to go ahead and capture this lifestyle. So he went ahead and drew this gigantic cafe, Musique in the Tuileries Gardens in the National Gallery of London, disguised from Paris in France. Why is this in London? Well, Manet aimed to actually avoid what to paint orderly fashion, so he went ahead and drew everyone with very, very broad brushstrokes too. And with that, he actually went ahead and did a great job with doing this too. Other paintings exist, but we're not going to get into them. Next up, we have the man, the legend, and my cat, Claude Monet. There we go. Claude Monet himself. Here is the mini Claude. And right now, he actually is a pretty good impressionist himself too. He drew this great painting, the Impressionism Sunrise. And with that, he went ahead and became famous with this too. He preferred to paint landscapes. He didn't really like painting people. And so he often went ahead and did things outdoors. In fact, that wasn't really available back then until they created paint tubes, which somehow Claude Monet himself actually lived to see. So he went ahead and painted most of his paintings outdoors. What are you looking at? Lots of times later, he went ahead and, well, drew all these kinds of landscapes too. Now back then, painting outdoors didn't really make a lot of sense because, well, the paint had to be made inside your studio, and why would you want to take everything outside and lose like 50% of the paint? The materials you needed to actually make the paints were inside studios, and they weren't really as movable. So nowadays we have these paint tubes, but then later they created these paint tubes during the Impressionism era. So he went ahead and drew all these kinds of landscapes. This one is called Wheat Stacks in the Snow Effect, and this one is called Claude Monet's Water Lilies and Japanese Bridge. This is just a section of it. There's more bridge over here, but that I can get. And so that's about it. That's Claude Monet's Water Lilies and Japanese Bridge. Claude Monet, farewell. He's already dead. Next up, we have Auguste Renoir. Now, Auguste Renoir basically went ahead and described Impression like this. One day, the Impressionists went ahead and ran out of black paint. That is when Impressionism was discovered. Lol. And with all this, you can go ahead and figure out things too. Impressionist techniques was not that simple at all, but there is an element of truth in this what Renoir actually said, because his special feature, at least most special features of Impressionism, was actually bright colors. He's the guy who drew the Auguste Renoir Dance at the Moulin de la Galette. This is in the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, in Paris, and I should ask my friend how you say that. So with this, you can go ahead and figure out that this cafe was conveniently located near Renoir's studio, which made him easy to actually bring his canvas there too. He took another advantage of another invention that I've already mentioned, the paint tube. And so, yeah, he went ahead and he even said this: paint tubes enabled us to paint in the open air. Without them, there would have been no Impressionism. That's kind of true too. Now you can go ahead and paint directly for the people too. You don't need like to draw a little sketch of it, like there's a woman here with that little hair, there's a woman, woman, there's a man with a hair, like that. You don't need to sketch that and take it to your studio and then try to turn that into a painting from memory. No. Now you can just do it like from one to one, face to face. Alright, our next artist, his name is Gustave Caillebotte, and it literally took like a long time before the young painters of the Impressionist area could actually go ahead and make a living from their art. Fortunately, however, one of their actual good friends was the old Gustav Violet. So Gustav's parents had left him and his brother with lots and lots of money, and Guybolt used his wealth to actually help most of his friends by many of their paintings. And Gustav was an outstanding partner of his own right, a painter of his own right, but he painted much differently from other impressionists too, which actually kind of made him more sense too. His pictures are not created as spontaneous or loosely so. They look more exact and orderly. And since they look more traditional, many critics championed him as just about the only impressionist who actually could paint correctly. I mean, this kind of makes sense too. There's this kind of painting. I mean, buildings, if you look like that way, do look a bit like this, but mainly I think that this kind of stretches our mind because that makes the building look like this when it's actually more or less. If you look on the one side, it's actually like this. If you look on the top, you might even see this as the building, but this kind of painting just makes it look like it's going in a triangle direction, which it most certainly isn't. Why is this turning off? Alright, there you go. Also, most of these painters actually went ahead and drew things too. There are lots of umbrellas, and everyone's very, very, I have to admit, very, very strict and very rigid too. Since he is also called one of the people to correctly paint, this one may be a little different. His name is Edgar Degas. Now, Edgar Degas himself is actually something that interests. He was interested in anything that moves, horses, racetrack, or a girl on ballet, dancers at ballet, but that's actually the last one. That was his favorite, dancers at the ballet. He liked drawing those, so he drew this, the ballet dancers, the star, L'Etoile, and he... It's actually called L'Etoile. And with that, he went ahead and painted from unusual angles too. He literally drew this girl doing this ballet dance, and with that, there's not much more to it. He even drew this little painting where the ballet dancers went ahead and practiced their flexibility on a bar, that bar where they go ahead and put their legs on just to make the flexibility more. Alright, next up we have finally a woman in the scene. Her name is Berthe Morisot, and if you remember from a previous artist, Edouard Manet, she actually married his brother. So 5 or 6 crazy people, one of them being a woman, actually went ahead and exhibited their paintings. And that's what a newspaper reported in 1874 about the Impressionists' first exhibition in Paris. And one of those mad people was Berthe Morisot too. And in Paris most of those days, most of the people back then just went ahead, most of the women back then went ahead and do painting as a little hobby. They didn't make it a career. But then she did so. She went ahead and drew this career too. She drew this called The Butterfly Hunt, and assuming that is either her or one of her daughters. Yeah, and that's about it. She was actually given private tutor lessons in art because art school wasn't available to women back then. In fact, women were barred from entering art school. And so, Corot, Camille Corot, back then a famous painter, went ahead and became her tutor with her sister, and he basically saw their talent and said, "Your daughters are so good that they're going to destroy the world with their paintings. We cannot have women paint." Well, fortunately for the daughters though, they went ahead and painted. Now, she went ahead, and Berthe went ahead and married, and her sister married, but then stopped. By the way, her name was Edma. Berthe, though, kept on painting, and then when she married Manet's brother, after Manet drew her so many times, she still kept painting, too. Thank God her brother-in-law was actually also an artist. Alright, next on, this is not Socrates, the ancient Greek philosopher. Also, he certainly does look a bit like him if he had a snubby nose. His name is actually Camille Pissarro. No, not Picasso. His name is Pissarro. Now, again, he is actually from the West Indies, which is now the American Virgin Islands. The Danish West Indies, which is now the American Virgin Islands. And he went ahead and started drawing lots of things. So, in fact, he's the one who basically went ahead and helped introduce Impressionism to the more Western world, too. He actually drew great ideas, too. He went in one of his paintings. Hardly any people are seen, but in these paintings, they're everywhere. He painted towns. He's basically City Monet. If he was Claude Monet, but he drew cities and towns. So all of his paintings include at least some people too. He certainly did copy Monet's style extremely well. Alright, next up we have another woman. Her name is simple enough. It's Marie Cassatt. Now, Marie Cassatt herself was not much of a great painter. A lot of people actually thought, but however, unfortunately for them, she was a really great painter too. Not a lot of people thought women can become great painters then. Nowadays, we don't even have that stereotype, but she turned into a profession. She eventually somehow got enough money from painting that she went ahead and started drawing things. In fact, she was also helped to make the Impressionism well known in America too. She frequently traveled back to her home country of America, and she went ahead and advised her wealthy friends to buy paintings from like Degas and Monet at that early point in time too. America. All right. Next up, our next artist is Max Lieberman. He's German, as his name suggests, and he did not like school tiny one bit. Ironically, though, he became the principal, the headmaster of an art school. Lol. Then again, that also kind of makes sense. It's an art school. Lol. That's actually a pretty big compliment for someone who actually hated school too. He liked drawing things too. And instead of studying chemistry, he went ahead and drew all these things. Eventually, his parents found out, all right, son, we'll let you be an artist. Hooray! For him, I guess. And then he went to art school, more expensive, and because travel was actually set to broaden the mind, he went ahead and toured Italy, France, Holland, and went ahead and studied all those paintings there, because back then, well, color photography wasn't a thing yet. He drew this. It's called The Parrot Man. It's actually it was originally from the zoo in Amsterdam. At that time, that zoo literally had this path where they let parrots go ahead and hang from wooden places and fly around as long as it was inside the path. Eventually, the parrot man went ahead and always caged them back in their cages every night, but every morning they would let them go into their bars of this path too. And he drew this. The exhibition ceases to exist right now. In fact, I think the zoo itself ceases to exist right now. Alright, next painter, we have Georges Seurat. Georges Seurat is actually one of the more, how shall we say this, more interesting painters, impressionist painters too. He drew this. Instead of using actual colors to go ahead and use brushstrokes, he went ahead and used, if you see closely, tiny dots to draw people as well too, which is why some of them lack faces. In fact, when I first saw this painting, I always thought it was actually just like a dot. This was dots of green. Oh, wait, sorry. Originally I thought this was dots of green mixed with a bit of white, dots of white. I thought this was like dots of white. This was dots of brown. But then I later found out he only used these three colors. Red, blue to make purple, and yellow. Now, he went ahead and used all these colors to go ahead and create a bunch of all these different colors too, different hues, and with all this primary colors and colors to remind, he made this kind of painting to go ahead and make our eyes to give out the illusion that all this gives out color by making our eyes mix the colors, which kind of makes sense if you do. If you zoom in good enough, you can see that these aren't green. These are actually just red and yellow too, which is kind of an interesting thing for me to talk about. In fact, this is what Georges Seurat himself drew. Next up, we have Childe Hassam. Read as taboo for names in my culture. Childe Hassam. Childe Hassam himself is actually a great artist too. He likes to travel around because it allows him to find inspiration and encounter new art forms while he's on the road too. In fact, while he was on the road, he drew this. This is in the Albert Knox Art Gallery of Buffalo, New York. This was built in 1816 and burnt to the ground 2 years later after Hassan painted this in 1905. So it lasted like 84 plus 85 equals 89 plus 2 equals 91 years. This church itself is pretty beautiful too, and lucky that Hassan himself was there when he drew it, because now we can see what the church used to look like. I would have liked to see that church. And here is Washington, D.C. This is apparently supposed to be the White House. The painting Avenue in the Rain belongs to the collection of the White House in Washington, D.C. And this actually goes ahead and hangs in the Oval Office. What a very big honor. Next up, we have Paul Signac. If you remember Georges Seurat, he went ahead and used dots in his paintings too. He went ahead and used red, blue, yellow, and maybe a bit of black and white. I think he cheated a little to create those optical illusions too. Paul Signac wanted to make the same of this, except he realized the dots were too small for him. So his solution, he just made the dots bigger, which in my opinion actually kind of made them a bit too blurry for me to see. You can this actually proves that you can use red, blue, and yellow, black and white to go ahead and make these paintings, but I don't think that's a good idea for people like me who need glasses, because if you take them off, then they're fine, but if you put them on, this kind of makes me dizzy a bit too. If you remember from like 2 days ago, one of the art forms, that wavy one, well, that makes it look 3D. It kind of makes me think of that too. Alright, finally, our last artist of the day is John Singer Sargent. John Singer Sargent, he was actually grew up quite differently from most of the other Americans too. He was American, but for health reasons, he actually went ahead and his parents lived for Europe, where they would move from one place to place every couple of months. And with that, he became one of the most famous portrait artists of his time too. In fact, he was actually inspired by that painter who drew La Meninas. In fact, a lot of the Impressionists actually were inspired by the person who drew La Meninas too, if I remember the name correctly, that is. And this is just a portrait of the daughters of a group of family members too, of a royal family. And with that, this is it. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode of Impressionism, 13 artists children should know. So until next time, Shannon out. Peace. Bye-bye. Dun 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 dun. Bye.